UNESCO demonstrated that artificial intelligent technology brings major benefits in many areas, but without the ethical guardrails, it risks reproducing real-world biases and ethical discrimination, fueling divisions and threatening fundamental human rights and freedoms. AI business models are hardly concentrated in just a few countries and a handful of firms, usually developed in a male-dominated teams without the cultural diversity that characterizes the world. Contrast this with the fact that half of the world's population still can count on a stable internet connection. Let's bring in Professor Christopher Lamont, Deputy Head of Program for Artificial Intelligence and Global Governance from the Global Governance Institute based in Brussels, Belgium. Thanks for joining us this evening.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
Okay, let's start the Global Affairs Insider. Okay, so how can artificial intelligence provoke cyber sovereignty? And what are the potential implications of AI when it comes to cyberspace among nations in the global community?
This is really interesting, right? This concept of cyber sovereignty, as I mentioned earlier, a few decades back, there was an idea that the internet was this borderless place, right, where you could interact with people from around the world and you could get information about what's happening in different countries, liberating in a sense. But as we see, kind of shortly thereafter, you had efforts by, for example, China to begin to regulate the country to make decisions about what kind of web platforms are accessible within their borders, but also to very effectively identify and take down content that they don't want to see online, right? And so the effectiveness of that has grown with the kind of the effectiveness of AI tools. So countries now have a capability to govern and regulate the digital space in a way that's different than they had in the past. And this is important because of how we communicate and the importance of social media today. Now, one of the things that AI literacy will teach you is that the feed you see on your social media, the information you see, is not neutral, right? It's not kind of a time-stamped feed that old social media used to be, right? It used to be like you'd go back and go through time and see who said what in your particular network. But rather, the information you're getting is informed by algorithms. And you might think about kind of the use of algorithms also in things like marketing, right? So if you click on something or you visit a particular website, you will get advertisements trying to sell you what you are looking at, assuming that you're interested in and want to see more of that. And translated to politics, right? If you kind of read certain stories or go to certain websites, that worldview that you have is then reinforced. Okay, add the next step and think about international politics. And if you're a country that might want to influence the politics of another country, right? And so as you see, right, with these tools and also with the ability to generate posts and generate texts, you can create these large armies of non-human bots, right, that are there to comment and distort and also distort what people are seeing and the messaging that people are seeing and messages that people see to one that is favorable to one that you would want to see. And you have a ruckus debate today in the United States over one such platform, very popular, that your listeners might be familiar with, and that's TikTok, right? Which is a Chinese-owned platform. And you saw some content on there that was quite controversial in the United States, kind of being promoted algorithmically to be seen by large audience on other US-based platforms. And so even in a country like the US that it used to be very freewheeling when it came to internet freedoms, you're having pressure now exerted on TikTok to transfer its ownership to the US. So this gets into this question of kind of cyber sovereignty, and not every state has the capability, right, to exercise this of sovereignty in this digital realm, as different countries come to different consensuses about just what is acceptable on the internet, and also kind of what counts as disinformation and what counts as misinformation. There are different understandings of this across different jurisdictions, and you have states now attempting to acquire the capabilities and infrastructure necessary to govern this digital space, or at the very least to have an awareness of it. So to know when you are the target of a potential information campaign by another state.
So where do we draw the lines of the digital space and its impact for transitional justice? And if I may add, in your recent publications, you have concluded that it is possible for AI to justify its findings since they co-auto-generated, such as in the case of forensic exams. But can you further explain to our viewers the meaning of such a statement?
Yeah, this is, thank you for asking about this. I recently contributed with a co-author, Medler Mema, to a handbook on global governance of big data and artificial intelligence. And that handbook includes a number of contributions looking at the impact of AI across a number of different policy areas. And the one that we focused on was that of transitional justice. And just so your listeners have a little bit of context here, transitional justice processes are processes that are aimed at dealing with the legacy of past human rights abuses. So you might think of things like criminal trials or truth commissions and the such. And just like every other facet of governance, transitional justice is also grappling with how algorithmic logics, datafication, and big data are transforming the practice of doing justice. And on the one hand, these technologies have allowed for the development of very powerful tools. And you mentioned, for example, the introduction of evidence into criminal trials. Some examples that people have written about include things like very complex tools that allow for DNA mixture and analysis. So for example, if in a crime scene there's like multiple kind of fragments of DNA that are recovered through AI-enabled tools, you're able to make a determination about kind of a person, an accused person who might be the subject of a criminal trial process. And this is controversial in part because normally in due process, you have a right to cross-examine a witness, right? So you have an expert witness who comes and they're an expert on, I don't know, kind of footprints or something of that nature. And they come and they testify to the court, and they can be cross-examined by the defense's counsel. And in this case here, you have kind of, you might think about like, and this is an interesting analogy, you might think about, well, what about when AI is the expert witness, right? When these tools become the expert witness. And the algorithms or their decision-making process is proprietary. It's corporate secret, right? Because the companies that developed them aren't going to release it to the public, because then their competitors, right, would have access to this. And so this is the due process challenge, in a sense that you don't know kind of how you're being accused, and also courts and different justice systems are taking this into account and have different levels of tolerance for this. To what extent can such evidence be entered into into judicial processes in the courtrooms, right? These are very important questions that get to the center or the heart of due process, right? And due process rights and also human rights more broadly, as we have a kind of creeping into kind of law and the justice process of more and more AI tools. And I think some of your viewers might be familiar with other aspects of this debate, thinking about things like, will you need a lawyer to draw up a contract, right? Or can small claims courts be adjudicated, right, with a non-human judge in a few years' time, right? And for most of those who kind of work around the justice sector, there are limitations, right, and important limitations and protections that require, and this is something you mentioned, the OSCE process, but if you think about the OECD's AI principles, kind of a focus, and this is something that Japan has promoted as well, a focus on human-centeredness, right, when it comes to these technologies. Again, different countries have taken different paths on this. If you think about kind of the European Union, right, there's a kind of firewall between AI technologies and criminal justice processes. These are kind of defined as kind of extremely high risk. But in the US, some states have begun to use these for kind of processes like making decisions about parole.
Professor Christopher Lamont, Deputy Head of Program for Artificial Intelligence and Global Governance from the Global Governance Institute in Brussels, Belgium. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. Just as a footnote, I'm physically in Tokyo, but that's...
Okay. This is Dr. Reyron del Rosario. That's the Global Affairs Insider. Follow us to our next episode only here in IPDCI News Channel.